Recently, I made the journey to Bury St Edmunds in order to visit the Suffolk Regiment Museum, which can be found in the regiment's old training depot of Gibraltar Barracks, and I'd just like to share my thoughts of the place with you. It's a very easy location to find, being situated right next to West Suffolk College. If you arrive by train like I did, it's only a 20-minute walk from the station. There is also, of course, a bus service that runs very close to it, as well as a small car park on the site itself. The location is staffed mostly by volunteers, and due to this it is only open a few days each month, that being every Wednesday and the first Sunday of each month, unless stated otherwise. So please keep this in mind if you're planning a visit. Another very important bit of information that I needed to share, and one of the main reasons I wanted to visit the museum ASAP, is that in this current format it will not be open very much longer. It will be closing in early October 2023 for around 9 months for a major restoration project. So, at time of recording, late August 2023, you only have really a few days in September to go if you want to see it in this current layout. The final bit of general information I want to give out before moving on to the museum itself is that unfortunately, due to the layout of the building, the main area of the museum is upstairs, so this could be hard to access for anyone with mobility issues. So please keep this in mind before paying it a visit. Entrance to the museum is free, but there are many donation boxes and even the card reading ones around the building that I would suggest if you enjoy your visit you put a little something in for them for upkeep. When you arrive you'll be greeted by a member of staff in a small reception area. Well, they will explain the layout of the museum to you before letting you get on your way. This ground floor area is also filled with display cases of medals received by members of the regiment over the years that have now been donated. And while some tell stories of recognised gallantry, with military medals and military crosses to be seen. Among them, Captain Norman Albert Bott, who, during the First World War, rose from corporal to captain, being wounded 9 times in the process, and decorated for bravery 3 times. Others hint at a far more different war. The 1939-45 star, the Pacific Medal and the War Medal often hint towards a man captured at Singapore in 1942. There is also a little timeline of the wars the regiment has fought in, and although this museum is both for the Suffolk and Cambridgeshire regiments, it being located in Suffolk, they are very much the main attraction. On the ground floor there is also a small display of the regiment's successors, the 1st East Anglian Regiment followed by the Royal Anglian Regiment that still exists to this day, and where they have served from Aden and Northern Ireland to Iraq and Afghanistan, and through them many of the regiment's traditions still live on. I was fortunate that when I went among the volunteers that day was a former member of the Suffolk Regiment who had served with them in Cyprus and Germany in the 1950s, before the amalgamations. So it was great to be able to have a little chat with him before moving on upstairs to the museum proper. Around the time this video comes out, you should also see my recommendation for the book Topies and Red Berets, written by Sylvanus Bevan, one of the last men to command the Suffolks. He talks a lot in his book about the hunting he did while stationed in India in the 1930s, something very popular with the regiment's officers. And as you head up the stairs, one of the first things you will see is the mounted head of a water buffalo shot in 1936 in India, most likely by a man who Bevan knew quite well. There is also a world map showing everywhere the regiment has served in its long history. The staircase is full of pictures of men who have served, from First World War commanders to the men who served in the interwar period, and so on. Once you reach the top, you will come to the main room of the museum, filled with display cases and dummies wearing uniforms from all different time periods, from the regiment's formation in 1685 to its final days in 1959. For those of you who have seen my visit to Norwich Castle and the Royal Norfolk Regiment Museum contained within, you will know I somewhat lamented the lack of items on display. It is very much the reverse here. Every case is full of items both big and small, each with amazing stories behind them, so much it can be difficult to keep track of it all. This is something they are planning to fix in their refurb, having items labelled much more clearly in places, as well as, from what I overheard, having this exhibition run in a much more timeline order of the regiment. I can't go into detail about everything on display, simply because there isn't time, and I also don't want to ruin things for anyone who wants to visit. But there is everything you can imagine here, from soldiers' kit to personal items, flags and banners captured, souvenirs from foreign lands and battlefields, and weapons used by the regiment on the back wall of the building, from the Brown Bess musket to the L1A1 self-loading rifle. To look at this back wall, some might be surprised by the inclusion of the US M1 carbine, as it is not a weapon that's generally connected with British forces, but due to its light weight and its rapid fire compared to a bolt action, it was very popular with men undertaking jungle patrols during the Malayan emergency. The opposite wall features captured weapons throughout the years, from the Boers in South Africa in 1902 to the Japanese, Germans and Italians in the Second World War, and even, just round the corner, is a more homemade rifle that was used in the Malayan emergency by insurgents. Spread out in front, as you can see, is the more heavy weapons the regiment would have used, from the Vickers machine gun, the Bren gun, the Piat mortar and the regular mortar. As I have said, I don't want to spoil everything they have on display for you, but I will list a few of my favourites to you. Starting with this, a copy of Minecamp, captured from Hillman Fortress in Normandy, the D-Day objective of the 1st Battalion of the Suffolk Regiment. It would prove a tougher obstacle than expected, and would slow the advance from Swordbeach dramatically. Below it is also a chunk of the structure itself. Next to it on the shelf is another interesting little item from the regiment's time in Normandy, an insignia cut from the uniform of a German sniper, who had shot and wounded a Suffolk soldier. His friends quickly finished the sniper off and presented him with it as a keepsake of the event. The next exhibit that really stood out to me was a mock-up of the living space of a member of the regiment during the National Service years, with their bed and wardrobe laid out as if for a kit inspection. I would be interested to know, if I have any viewers who have served in the military, how familiar this looks to them, other than obviously the uniform and type of equipment being shown. Having already mentioned Sylvanus Bevan earlier, it would only be right to mention his display of keepsakes from his time in the Suffolk's Parachute Regiment and briefly East Anglian Regiment, as well as his medal ribbons. Due to his rather interesting career of switching between regiments, this gained him both the Burma and France and Germany star. In his book he also says how proud he is of his medals, so it's nice to see that in some form they are now on public display. I do apologise for the poor quality of this photo, by the way. With the light where it was very hard to get a good picture through the glass. A quick honourable mention would be this display case of different types of uniforms for the Suffolks, from commanding officers to enlisted men in Cyprus, and even a mention towards the Suffolk Home Guard. The final item I wish to point out is the Victoria Cross, awarded to Arthur Frederick Saunders for his actions during the Battle of Luce in 1915, while serving with the 9th Battalion of the Suffolk Regiment. I've already done a presentation on Arthur, so if you wish to see that, please follow the link on screen now. But I just want to say I think it's fantastic that a museum like this is able to hold on to a medal, especially when so many end up in the Ashcroft collection, away from any real connection to their regiments. Before I end, I just want to say how great and friendly the staff in the museum were, from answering questions to generally chatting to you if you wanted to. Very knowledgeable and keen in what they were doing. No surprise, as volunteers are often the best when it comes to talking about their subjects. They have a small gift shop attached to the museum, mostly selling books. I had a look through it and sadly already owned much of what was on offer, so didn't buy anything this time, but did leave a donation to the museum. They also sell regimental ties and t-shirts, but having no connection to the regiment myself, this is not something I wanted to own, but obviously completely each to their own when it comes to this kind of thing. Overall, I enjoyed the museum immensely and can't wait to see what they do with the refurb that's coming up, and will make a point of returning when they reopen for a second visit, and hopefully take more pictures for you this time. I will fully admit I was so busy looking at things I forgot to take pictures most of the time. It's certainly a place I would recommend you visiting, although I will fully say it is not the biggest museum in the world. So, unless you're like me and don't mind making a trip for a single thing, I would suggest making it part of a day out in Bury St Edmunds, and visiting some of the other sites and attractions there as well. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A link to the museum's website can be found in the description, as well as links to any pictures I've used that are not my own. Please feel free to like and subscribe if you wish. This was a visit to the Suffolk Regiment Museum, and this was a little bit of history.